As we've already seen, many representations of the heavenly handshake do not portray the twins themselves. The hands extend towards the center from a circle, as in this carving on the Salt Lake Temple. However, the twins are implied by the circle itself, formed by the circuit of the crescent during the daily cycle. In this case, the hands are both male. The clasping of hands does not signify becoming one flesh as in the sacred hand clasp of husband and wife. Instead, as we have discussed previously, it represents amity, fellowship, and covenant. The archetype of the sacred handclasp takes another form in the Genesis account. When Abraham was nearing death, he had his servant swear to him that he would not allow his son to marry a daughter of the Canaanites. The servant did so by putting his hand under the patriarch's thigh. This ritual of oath-taking was repeated by Jacob, where he had his son Joseph swear to bury him outside of Egypt. The ritual is a form of swearing fidelity and oath-taking, like unto raising one's right hand or shaking hands. Like the handclasp, the touching of the thigh is a symbolic artifact of the mythic twins. The depiction of the death of Pentheus clearly follows the archetype. Pentheus, the figure in the center with outstretched arms, was king of Thebes. As such, he is an avatar of Mars. His arms are the plasma streams stretching outward from Venus. On each side of Pentheus stands a female with an arched back. Now, these are the two crescent figures, the twins. As they dismember the king, their arms form a secondary and smaller circular enclosure. In this particular version of the mythic scene, the left arm of Pentheus stretches beyond the female to the right and touches the thigh of a satyr with upraised arms. The satyr also is arched in the shape of a crescent. Touching the thigh is a mythic interpretation of the intersection of plasma streamer and crescent. Another Greek red figure bowl shows Bacchus playing a pipe and being touched on the thigh just below his genitals. The twins' archetype is not only right and left, but is also above and below. When the crescents were positioned opposite each other at their highest and lowest points, they represented one above the other, as in this illustration of Nut and Geb from the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
For example, in Egypt, we see the aspects above and below and the symbolic pairing of the figures Nut and Geb.
In the center of the illustration stands the god Shu. His head is the planet Mars within the enclosure, and his outstretched arms are the plasma streamers. His torso is the axis mundi. The arms are also in the shape of a ka, or squared outstretched arms, a representation of the crescent.
Indeed, every primary interpretation of the revolving crescent was predictably linked to the dualities of above and below, or left and right. It was not just as a pair of outstretched arms that we see the twin roles of the crescent, upright in the phase of growing bright and inverted in the phase of growing dim.
Shu's arms touching the body of the goddess Nu makes a secondary circular enclosure. Shu's left hand touches the breasts of Nu, and his right hand touches the thighs of the goddess, known as the two thighs of Nut.
Elsewhere in imitation of Ra, the deceased king aspires to shine between the two thighs of Nut.
Though not graphically explicit, the hand is inserted in between the two thighs. In actuality, the two thighs were the two opposing crescents themselves. which divided the enclosure into two halves and formed the twin goddesses themselves. This version of Newt and Geb shows Geb inserting his foot between Newt's thighs. The facsimile makes it clear that the foot is between the thighs. Again, the plasma streamers represented limbs, either arms or legs. In summary, it is the archetype of the twins and central figure that is the origin of both the handshake, and the touching the thigh as symbolic as a surety of an oath.